Number 1. The Thousand-Year Lie. Here's the thing that should blow your mind. The Jedi Order spent an entire millennium preparing for the return of the Sith. And yet when Darth Sidious waltzed right into the heart of the Republic, they didn't see it coming until it was far too late. This wasn't just a failure. This was a catastrophic collapse of an institution that prided itself on foresight and wisdom. Let's set the stage properly. Around the year 1000 BBY, the Jedi Order fought the Brotherhood of Darkness in what became known as the New Sith Wars, culminating in the Battle of Ruusan. When the dust settled, the Jedi believed they had wiped out the Sith completely. Master Yoda would later tell Luke Skywalker that the Sith had been extinct for a millennium, and technically, he wasn't lying. The old Sith Empire, with its armies and multiple Dark Lords, was genuinely destroyed. But here's where the Jedi made their first critical mistake. They assumed extinction meant victory was permanent. What the Jedi didn't know was that Darth Bane, the sole survivor of Ruusan, had implemented the Rule of Two. This ancient Sith doctrine limited the Order to only 2 practitioners at any given time, one master to embody power, and one apprentice to crave it. Bane recognized that the old Sith Empire had destroyed itself through infighting and power struggles. By limiting their numbers, the Sith would grow stronger through concentrated knowledge and purpose, operating in absolute secrecy, while the Jedi celebrated their supposed victory. The Jedi Council acknowledged that the dark side philosophy couldn't simply vanish. Those who craved power would always exist. Yet 1,000 years of peace transformed vigilance into comfortable theory. The Sith had become legend, then myth, and finally, a cautionary tale for younglings rather than a present danger. This psychological shift from alertness to complacency would prove fatal. Number 2. Arrogance breeds blindness. The Jedi of the High Republic era were genuinely heroic, selfless guardians of peace and justice. But by the twilight of the Republic, something had fundamentally changed within the Order. They had become victims of their own success, and that success bred an institutional pride that created dangerous vulnerabilities. Master Yoda himself admits this tragic flaw. In Attack of the Clones, when discussing their diminished ability to use the Force, Yoda acknowledges, "Blind we are, if creation of this clone army we could not see." Later, Mace Windu suggests they shouldn't inform the Senate of their failing powers, fearing it would multiply their enemies. Think about what this actually means. The Council knows they're compromised, yet their solution is concealment, rather than seeking help or changing their approach. This is pride masquerading as strategy. The Jedi had become so convinced of their own righteousness and wisdom that they couldn't conceive of being outmaneuvered. When Qui-Gon Jinn reports encountering a Sith on Tatooine, the Council's response is skepticism bordering on dismissal. Ki-Adi-Mundi states, "The Sith have been extinct for a millennium," while Mace Windu adds that a Sith Lord couldn't have returned without them knowing, not, "How can we prepare?" or "We must investigate immediately." Just flat rejection based on the assumption that their historical records couldn't possibly be incomplete. This overconfidence extended to their interpretation of the Chosen One prophecy. When Anakin Skywalker entered their lives, they fixated on whether he would bring balance to the Force, never seriously considering that balance might not mean complete dominance of the light side. The prophecy was thousands of years old, from a different era of the Jedi Order, yet they assumed they understood it perfectly. The Council's inability to question their own interpretations and dogma created a massive blind spot that Palpatine exploited ruthlessly. Number 3. Servants of politics. Perhaps no factor contributed more to the Jedi's downfall than their deep entanglement with the Galactic Republic. What began as a partnership for peace gradually transformed into something far more insidious. The Jedi became enforcers, diplomats, and ultimately generals for a political system they should have been watching from a careful distance. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant sat literally at the heart of galactic politics, right in the Republic's capital. This physical proximity mirrored their philosophical proximity. When the Supreme Chancellor called, the Jedi answered. When senators needed protection or disputes required mediation, the Jedi obliged. This created a fundamental conflict of interest that compromised their primary duty as guardians of the Force itself. They became so focused on serving the immediate needs of the Republic that they stopped looking at the bigger picture. Count Dooku saw this problem clearly, even before he fell to the dark side. In various canon sources, including Master and Apprentice and Dooku Jedi Lost, we learn that he repeatedly warned the Council about corruption in the Senate and argued that the Jedi had become servants rather than independent peacekeepers. The Council dismissed his concerns as political cynicism. When Dooku eventually turned and became Darth Tyrannus, the Jedi wrote off all his previous warnings as the bitter ramblings of a fallen Jedi. never considering that he might have been right about the corruption even if wrong about his solution. The Clone Wars represented the absolute culmination of this political entanglement. When war erupted, the Jedi Order transformed overnight from peacekeepers into military commanders. Master Yoda, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and countless others became generals leading clone armies into battle. The tragedy is that they had no real choice by that point. If they refused to fight, the Republic would fall to the Separatists, and millions would die. Palpatine had engineered a scenario where the Jedi's compassion and duty to protect life forced them onto a battlefield that weakened them spiritually and spread them thin across the galaxy, away from Coruscant where he was consolidating power. If you're loving this deep dive into how the Jedi failed, hit that hype button and share this with your Star Wars crew. The new hype feature helps creators like us bring you more quality breakdowns. Now, let's explore how the dark side itself became the Jedi's enemy. Number 4. The Dark Side Veil. Here's where things get truly sinister. The Jedi weren't just fighting their own pride and political compromises. They were battling against an active, intelligent suppression of their abilities by the dark side itself, orchestrated deliberately by Darth Sidious and his master before him. In The Phantom Menace, Yoda describes it perfectly. The dark side clouds everything. Impossible to see. The future is... This wasn't metaphorical. The dark side of the Force was literally creating a shroud around Coruscant and the Jedi Temple, blocking their ability to sense danger, see the future, or detect the Sith Lord operating right under their noses. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. The Sith, particularly Sidious, were actively and continuously using dark side techniques to blind the Jedi. Think about how insane this actually is. Chancellor Palpatine met regularly with the Jedi Council. He sat in the same room as Master Yoda and Mace Windu, two of the most powerful Jedi Masters in the Order's history, and they felt nothing. No disturbance in the Force, no warning signals, no intuitive sense that something was wrong. Anakin Skywalker, supposedly the chosen one with unprecedented Force sensitivity, became Palpatine's friend and confidant without detecting anything amiss until the very end. This wasn't entirely the Jedi's fault. The Sith had been perfecting these concealment techniques for 1,000 years under the rule of 2. Each Sith Master passed down refined methods to their apprentice, who improved upon them further. By the time Darth Plagueis and then Darth Sidious reached the culmination of the grand plan, the dark side veil had become an incredibly sophisticated weapon. Sidious chose to base his operations on Coruscant, specifically because the planet's dense population, endless political intrigue, and the Jedi's complacency created the perfect environment for concealment. The Jedi also made themselves more vulnerable to this shroud through their own practices. They had become so focused on tranquility, meditation, and the light side that they'd lost their understanding of the dark side. Ancient Jedi had studied their enemies deeply, understanding darkness to better oppose it. But the modern Jedi Order forbade such study, treating the dark side as something to be avoided entirely rather than understood. This meant that when the veil fell over them, they didn't even have the framework to recognize what was happening. Number 5. Ignoring screaming warnings. Even with all their handicaps, the Jedi weren't completely blind. The tragedy is that they received multiple clear warnings and either dismissed them or failed to connect the dots until circumstances had spiraled beyond recovery. The first major warning came when Qui-Gon Jinn encountered Darth Maul on Tatooine. This should have triggered a complete overhaul of Jedi operations and security. The Sith had returned. Instead, the Council treated it almost academically. Yes, they acknowledged it, but there was no sense of urgent crisis. They didn't recall Jedi from missions to secure key Republic installations or launch a galaxy-wide investigation. They simply continued business as usual. When Maul killed Qui-Gon on Naboo, confirming beyond doubt that the Sith were real and active, the Council's response remained measured to the point of negligence. The second warning came a decade later when Count Dooku revealed crucial intelligence to Obi-Wan Kenobi on Geonosis. In Attack of the Clones, Dooku explicitly tells Obi-Wan that the Republic is under the control of a Sith Lord named Darth Sidious, and that hundreds of senators are under his influence. This is incredibly specific intelligence from someone who had been one of the Order's greatest masters. The Council's response? Complete dismissal. They tell Obi-Wan that it's not in Dooku's character to assassinate anyone, acknowledging his former honor, yet they ignore everything he said anyway, assuming he was simply trying to turn Obi-Wan with lies rather than seriously investigating whether a Sith Lord actually controlled the Senate. The third warning was Anakin Skywalker himself. Multiple Jedi Masters, including Yoda and Mace Windu, sensed something wrong with the boy from the moment Qui-Gon brought him before the Council. Yoda explicitly saw fear and anger in young Anakin. They granted him training despite these reservations, but then failed to provide the specialized guidance and support he desperately needed. When Anakin began having visions of Padme dying, when his behavior became increasingly erratic, when Palpatine showed clear favoritism toward him, the Council never connected these warning signs into a comprehensive picture of danger. The final missed warning was perhaps the most damning. In Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine appoints Anakin to the Jedi Council as his personal representative. This was an unprecedented political interference in Jedi affairs. The Chancellor was placing his own operative on the Council. Instead of refusing outright or investigating why Palpatine wanted someone there, the Council accepted Anakin but denied him the rank of Master, creating resentment without solving the fundamental problem. They were more concerned with maintaining their independence symbolically than actually protecting it practically. Number 6. The ultimate price. The consequences of the Jedi's failures weren't abstract or theoretical. They were catastrophic, immediate, and nearly complete. Order 66 represented the ultimate price paid for a millennium of complacency, institutional pride, and misplaced priorities. When Palpatine executed Order 66, approximately 10,000 Jedi were killed within hours. Masters, Knights, Padawans, and even younglings at the temple were slaughtered by the very clone troopers they had fought beside for 3 years. The Jedi had been so focused on winning the Clone Wars that they never investigated the origins of the clone army itself, or considered whether an army of programmable soldiers might represent a vulnerability. The inhibitor chips in every clone's brain meant that the Jedi generals were commanding their own future executioners. The destruction went beyond mere numbers. The Jedi Order represented a 25,000-year-old tradition of knowledge, philosophy, and Force lore. When the temple burned and the Jedi were scattered, millennia of accumulated wisdom was lost. Ancient texts, holocrons containing the teachings of legendary masters, and entire philosophical traditions vanished in a single night. Palpatine understood that destroying the Jedi meant destroying their knowledge just as much as killing their members. But perhaps the deepest tragedy was what the Jedi's failure cost the galaxy. For 1,000 years, the Jedi had served as a check on tyranny and corruption. They weren't perfect, but their presence maintained a baseline level of justice and protection for ordinary people. When they fell, that check disappeared. The Empire rose in their place, bringing oppression, xenophobia, and the subjugation of countless worlds. The price of the Jedi's collective failure was paid by trillions of beings across the galaxy who suffered under Imperial rule for more than 2 decades. The Jedi's collapse also twisted the legacy of Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, who was supposed to bring balance to the Force. Because the Council never truly trusted him, never gave him the support he needed, and used him as a political tool in their conflict with Palpatine, they pushed him directly into the Sith Lord's arms. Anakin did eventually fulfill the prophecy by destroying the Sith and returning to the light, but only after becoming Darth Vader and helping exterminate the very order that trained him. The prophecy was fulfilled, but at a cost so devastating that it raised questions about whether balance was worth the price. The lesson here is profound and unsettling. The Jedi failed not because they were evil or weak, but because they became comfortable. They believed in their own righteousness so completely that they stopped questioning themselves. They served political masters instead of the Force itself. In the end, the Jedi Order's greatest enemy wasn't Palpatine or the Sith, or even the dark side. It was their own inability to recognize and adapt to their shortcomings before the galaxy paid the price for their blindness. The Jedi's tragic blindness reminds us that even heroes must question themselves to survive. If this breakdown enlightened your Star Wars knowledge, smash that hype button, subscribe, and let us know what topic we should explore next. May the Force be with you.